Hey, Manchester hooks it. Auburn and soon to be Goffstown, maybe?
Soon to be Goffstown and Bedford. Yeah.
That's really exciting.
We're working on that. We made an advance.
That's my hometown.
Yep.
Here we are, and it's the middle of November.
Before you go on, ManchesterTV.org. We are worldwide. You can stream us.
And that's the address?
ManchesterTV.org. Yep.
Thank you for
Click the
remembering
23
that.
icon.
We need to do that.
When you're on vacation down in
We
Florida.
deserve to be heard around the world.
I think so.
Doubt about
I think
that.
so. Look at the impact we had on the election.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did. Hey, Mike, I'm really excited and happy to be here with you, as always. But, we have our caucus tomorrow.
Yes, it's first day of orientation and everything else, right?
Well, no.
Select leaders.
Orientation's a couple days away, but
yeah.
the caucus is tomorrow. We're going to pick our candidate for Speaker of the House.
And you have an abundance of riches
We
on
have
the
a-
Democratic side.
We
in
have
the
an
House
abundance of
Representatives.
riches, which is also a little cautionary because I don't want to see us with this nice majority we have. We are now 234 to 133. I don't want to,
even with people not making it because not everybody shows up every day.
That's right, and I don't want to see us jeopardize that. But we do have a contested vote for Speaker now, and
Now, why would you think a contested race for any position would jeopardize unity?
because people have, they feel aggrieved and hurt if their candidate doesn't win. I mean, this
Even with the two guys, Steve Shirtliff and Rennie Cushing, both of whom are big boys,
And
very
both of-
experienced politicians,
and both of whom
good friends of each other.
and both of whom I love and admire. Rennie Cushing is my hero. He's my hero. Since the days of the Seabrook demonstrations when he managed to get himself arrested many times, and I never did. Mea culpa. I'm sorry I didn't get arrested, but I didn't.
Bob, they needed you to argue their cases to get them
Well,
out of jail.
I think I was mistaken about that. I think they needed me to get arrested, but I never did. But Rennie did more
Well,
than
we can do
once.
something about that next week if you'd like.
We're getting off topic here. We got a topic we want to get to, Mike. But this is an outstanding result in the state of New Hampshire. Unbelievable. We have a guest here, Herb Pence, a major contributor to this. I have no doubt Peter Griffin was too. We're going to talk about rail tonight because, I'm tired of Manchester, New Hampshire being the last major urban center in the country with no passenger rail. And we're going to talk about that because I think now maybe we have some chance. We still have a Republican in the governor's office.
Well, look, Bob, we haven't even been able to study or talk about it with the Republican legislature. Now,
We
at least
studied it. It's time to go beyond studies, right?
Correct.
We're ready.
Well,
ready
they
to go.
they shot down the implementation plan, saying
Yeah.
it was just another study. But
Well,
that's what I'm trying to say.
We're getting on, but Mike, I want to turn it over to you for the POTUS report and your announcement that you're changing the
Yep.
format of this show.
Bob, I am in light of the election that took place 2 weeks ago or last week, and the lessons learned. And I think one of the lessons learned by Democrats and progressives was that, maybe you shouldn't take the bait. Maybe you should focus on your work, mind your own business, and implement your own plan. And I think that is why Democrats were successful. They stuck to their own script. They didn't go out and campaign against Donald Trump. They campaigned for what they wanted to do when they got into the positions
Number
they
one,
were running.
health care.
And health care being the
Save
number
your
one.
health care. Folks, in this country, we now have a possibility of not universal, but, getting close to universal.
There's always
access
the
to healthcare.
possibility of Medicare for all and universal health care, not for profit health care. But I wanted to take my lead on that. And I think we're going to stop focusing on the president of the United
That may
States.
be tough.
I may do an occasional POTUS report if something really remarkable happens. But what I want to focus on now is what happens going forward. And I'm going to try to focus on the things that are happening in the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. So we'll kind of shift
Oh, I'm interested in that.
our vision a little bit. I'll try
I'm
to zero
really
in
interested in that.
on things and see if I can bring a regular report on that once we get organized. But for the holidays, I think we're going to suspend a little bit, focus on our guests, take a little different approach,
Interesting.
and
Okay.
come back next year with a different focus.
Okay. Hey, do you want to talk to Jack? We have a call. on
Why
the
not?
line.
Why not? Before we
Hey.
even get started, we'll take Jack's call.
Hey, Jack, we're happy to have you join us on the Progress Report. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm looking for an explanation on why the ballot in the city of Manchester, there are 12 wards, that there are 6 different type of ballots in the 12 wards. In 2 wards, the Democrat is listed first. In 4 or 5 wards, the Libertarian is listed. Then, like in the Republican Party, the Republicans are listed first. The only column that does not change is the last column that is write-ins. Can you tell me why in every ward, not every ward, but 6 out of the 12, and if you check, they're different listings in columns. What is the explanation of that? The power in each ward, whoever the party is, gets to list first?
That's a great question.
I think I know the answer.
Do you want to take it? I could take
I
it too
think
if
the
you
answer
want.
to this is that the Secretary of State's office does his, and Bill Gardner, with 42 years in office, we can talk about that too, because it's a challenge. But I think the answer is they try to make this very fair by scrambling who's at the top of the ticket in any particular election, ward to ward. Is that right? Is that what
You're
saying?
very close. Actually, it's the result of a lawsuit where the court determined that ballot placement was important and that it was important within the columns, how the parties
Yeah.
are arranged, and also within those columns, you may notice that the alphabet, it's not always A to Z. What they do is the Secretary of State's office picks a key letter, and that is used for the starting point. So the ballots are randomized. The people on the ballots are the same. It's not hanky-panky, and it is certainly not selected by any ward bosses or anything like that. It's run by the state through the Secretary of State's office, and it's designed in response to a lawsuit to make sure that nobody, year upon year upon year, has an advantage in ballot placement.
Very good. Very, very knowledgeable. All right. Okay, enough of that.
I hope it was helpful.
Do you want to talk about POTUS or not tonight?
Nope, I think we've
Okay.
gotten through that. We're going to suspend. We're going to talk about some more pleasant things. Kind of get away from politics a little bit. Although we're going to talk
Not
a little
entirely.
policy today and how politics impacts that.
So we have 2 outstanding guests to join us today, and I hope folks will continue to call in like the caller we just had, 640-3091. But we have 2 outstanding callers today, and it goes to something that's near and dear to my heart. As a native of New Hampshire, growing up, born in Goffstown, going to Goffstown schools, loving the great city of Manchester. And they are Peter Griffin and Herb Pence. And both of these people have been very active in many areas of the state, but particularly in the effort to get us finally not to be the major urban center in the entire United States without access to passenger rail. And nobody's done more on this than you, Peter. And you are the president of the Hampshire Rail Revitalization Association.
That is correct. It was founded in 1992. It's the oldest transportation rail advocacy group in New Hampshire.
Well, that's good news and bad news. You've been there that long, and we still haven't got it done.
I haven't been there that long, but I've been there long enough, and that is true.
Okay. Well, tell us a little about yourself and about this organization and how you feel about things now and where we're going.
I'm optimistic. I grew up in Windham, and I still live in Windham. I've been town moderator in Windham. I oversee the elections. Coincidentally, we're talking about elections for 26 years in March. I commuted to Boston for over 20 years.
By rail?
No, by my automobile. This was even before the the New Hampshire-Boston bus service. And it got worse and worse and worse.
I believe that.
And then I was moved to Merrimack, New Hampshire, and retired from Fidelity Investments after 21 years. But I'm also have served on 2 regional planning commissions, Rockingham Planning based in Exeter, and also currently Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission based in Manchester. So I'm looking at rail as a part of a balanced transportation system that is key to economic development, competitive economic development. New Hampshire is the only state in the union, including Alaska and Hawaii, that does not include rail as part of a state-funded transportation system.
Really?
Yes. And then conversely, in addition to that, the other example is you had Amazon coming to New Hampshire recently. We were appealing to
Yeah, we
Amazon.
made
Yeah,
an effort.
we were suckers for that scam,
And
but
how-
we can talk about that
And
another day.
how can Amazon, which is perhaps the most successful company in the world, say we want public transportation, combined with every other state in the union having public transportation rail? How can everyone else be wrong and New Hampshire right by refusing to allow it to happen?
Yeah. I mean, that was an outstanding thing, because our governor, who did get reelected, not by a lot, but did get reelected, he's been an opponent of expanding rail to the Merrimack Valley Corridor, the Capital Corridor, as we call it. But then when he was interested in making a bid to get Amazon's second headquarters, he was willing to put rail in there. And once we lost, not surprisingly, he all of a sudden reverted to being against rail.
Well, I think the union leader had called him on that will he really support it in the future? It'd be interesting to see if he does, if there's legislation that comes through the House and the Senate supporting various rail initiatives.
Yeah, yeah.
You
So-
know, one of
go ahead.
the
Go ahead,
arguments that I've heard against rail is that it doesn't pay for itself, every penny. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned the bus service, and the state of New Hampshire owns those buses.
And the
How
bus
can-
service is subsidized, roads are subsidized.
Of
If you
course.
look at the public works budget for various cities and towns, it includes a big block of your tax money for roads and bridges.
Sure does.
So,
How does that argument fly? I mean, how can they promote that argument about cost with a straight face when they're treating this method of transportation different from any other?
they choose to ignore it, even when they have experts telling them exactly what you've just stated, that all modes of transportation are subsidized.
Yeah. Peter, you've been working on this a long time, and valiantly, I must say. Are you feeling a little more encouraged now? I mean, can we get to where we want to be, which is the restoration of passenger rail service? Do you see a path forward for us?
I really do. I think this election, which really shocked me, I'm
In a pleasant way.
I'd like to say I'm eternally optimistic when we have a result like this, where you have a group of individuals that are supportive of rail. And yes, I do feel good about it.
What can we do?
I think because the election is over, we shouldn't forget who our elected officials are and who we've voted for, no matter which party they may be a part of, to say in 2 years, we have a 2-year election cycle. You
We
want my
certainly do.
vote in 2 years, you have to do this, this, and this regarding rail as part of a transportation system.
Let's talk to Bob.
Let's see what he has to say.
Hi, Bob. I like your name. I hope you're willing to join us and participate. Hi there.
Hello?
Yeah, you're welcome. You're on the Progress Report. Please join us.
Oh, Bob, when it comes to railroads, when I was a small boy, my mother used to take me to Boston from the Boston Railroad. She'd take me to Manchester Depot, and we would ride to Boston. And when did this all end, anyway, that railroad station? I know it was torn down.
Yeah.
They had an iconic railroad station there, and it was
Yeah.
torn down. When did railway transportation stop in the city?
Good question.
That's a good question. What do you-
I'm going to make a guess, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I say 1958?
It could very well be Herb.
1968.
Was it 68?
Was it late-
Because I
that
remember
late?
seeing the trains come through.
No kidding.
And it was John Mongan's administration, during John Mongan's administration as mayor, that the train station came down. I know that.
Well, that's when the MBTA took over the commuter rail from the Boston and Maine, and because New Hampshire was outside of the Commonwealth, they cut the service to Concord. They cut it off at Lowell, and at the time in 1968, the operation was supporting itself. In other words, we'll say it was making money. It was not in
Really?
deficit, but they
No
cut it
kidding.
off because it was outside of the Commonwealth.
I did not know that. That's very interesting.
There
Because
wa-
I remember using the rail to go to Boston.
There was a pilot program, I believe, during Hugh Gallen's administration.
Yes, there was.
That didn't, once the term was up, it was never renewed.
And
that
they
was-
they didn't build stations, just to wait on the side of the train, and the service was not robust.
You didn't have the grand stations like you did in Manchester and
Oh, what a
Concord.
grand station we had.
But one of the.
What a glorious,
I think
glorious grand station.
the other things you have to think of too is rail is not just a standalone entity to take people to Boston. And that's been a very nasty comment to establishment of rail. Why do we want to make it easy for people to go to work in Massachusetts? Well, we have the same symbiotic relationship to Boston as White Plains, New York, and Stamford have to New York City.
Exactly.
They've become huge economic engines because they've used the existing public transportation rail network to attract businesses.
To go both ways.
Either as a total relocation to those areas or branches of those businesses, and then they've also facilitated a reverse commute out of New York City. You have the millennials that say, I want to be in the thick of the city, but would they be lured to Dean Kamen's think tank because of the mystique of it, doing a reverse commute up here? We have to think of that.
Right.
You have to look at byproducts. For instance, Boston Landing, huge New Balance headquarters in Brighton, Massachusetts. Bruins training facility, Celtics training facility, hotel, condos, apartments.
And a
they've
brand
been-
new train station.
And they built a new train station, which they will
Where?
maintain right on the Boston-Worcester line. They will maintain
No
it for
kidding.
10
Yep.
years. And because they want to be able to make it easy for a whole new worker pool in Worcester that may not normally want to drive to Boston, will take
I
the
mean,
train.
who does,
Yep.
really?
I think they're calling it West Station, too. isn't
They
it?
are, they are. And
Yep.
you have byproducts like that that can happen, and that has spawned a giant Volvo dealership next door that has apartments and condos in addition to the dealership, and Stop and Shop, which was just going to rebuild their little market, is now taking advantage of that station and building a whole new village within a village. So there's that opportunity.
You know, it's interesting.
Back in
ahead,
September, I
Kurt.
rode the new commuter rail, CT rail, Connecticut rail, from Springfield, Mass, down to New Haven and came back.
Right.
And everybody thinks in airline terms of point to point. But there are a lot of people that use commuter rail to get on and off in between. And I was amazed at the number of people in Connecticut and in
I mean,
Massachusetts.
between Springfield and New
Oh,
Haven?
yeah.
Yeah, in New
No
Haven.
kidding.
That there was a lot of, quote, local traffic, that people were not riding
Yeah.
end to end.
Wow.
And one of the other popular ridership bases is the schools college network in Manchester and Nashua. Rivier College has a cooperative program for their nursing program. They would love to be able to access Boston hospitals or hospitals up here. You have the great institutions, educational institutions in Manchester that could attract students by rail from Massachusetts. Or from, even if you extend it up eventually, from the North Country, from Concord and things like
Yeah.
that.
You know, not too far from here at the corner of Bridge and Elm, there's a nice little cafe called the Bridge Cafe.
Yes.
And back of them is a place called the Game Assembly. And there's a bunch of young guys there, you know, wearing these virtual reality things and all this crap I don't understand. And they're developing games, computer games. And they're here because, number one, the prices are a lot cheaper to get space to do this stuff here than in Cambridge, Boston, you know, that area. And but they're not from here, but they would love to come here by rail, because if they're on the train, they can keep working. They want to work. I mean, have you been down there and seen these folks?
I have not, but
Oh,
I'm familiar with it.
it's worth it. I mean, tell you, these people are the exact kind of people we want to have in New Hampshire.
And I think we want to talk about that. It's time for our break. When we come back, we've had other, Gray Chenoweth, for example.
Gray Chenoweth.
Executives with the tech industry here in Manchester.
yep.
Who are dying to get rail so that they can bring the talent.
And I want to talk about the role of MBTA in this, and I know you know
Yeah,
about that.
we'll get that
Pete.
after
Yeah.
the break. We'll take a quick break.
We'll be right back. Hi, everybody out there in our viewer world of Manchester, Candia,
The
Hooksett,
whole wide world.
Auburn, and soon to be Goffstown, apparently.
And Bedford.
We are following up on the election results from last week, plus one day, and we are back on the issue of, can we restore passenger rail service to Manchester, New Hampshire? Can we end our benighted distinction of being the biggest major urban center in the entire country with offers of passenger rail? You've been down, you've seen the workforces on I-93. They're working hard. They've been working for years and years and years. And when they get that road done, you know what that's going to happen? There's going to be more cars, and I think this thing is going to fill up again. And the buses are great, but you know what? They get stuck in that traffic too.
Those subsidized, state subsidized buses.
And this
let's
is
not forget that.
subsidized. This is and of course, there's a whole lot of subsidization going on for the whole project. How about bringing back passenger rail so that not only can we go to Boston and go to Bruins games or Celtics games or the Museum of Science, anything you want to do,
Or to Nashua.
or he made
You don't have to ride to the end of the train. We
You
were
don't
just
have to
talking
ride the
about
end of
that.
the train.
You could hop down
How
to
about
Manchester,
we can
go
bring
down to
people
Nashua.
from that area up here to fulfill our desire to have young entrepreneurial talent come up here? We have attractions for them. We have lower costs for business space, living space than they will find around Cambridge or even now Somerville or the other suburbs of Boston. They can come here, but they want to come here without having to have their hands on the wheel and worry about traffic jams. So that's a big thing. So what we got here is two fine advocates for restoring rail service to New Hampshire. Peter Griffin, the president of the New Hampshire Rail Revitalization Association, and Herb Pence, and I don't know what your title. Well, you got a title you want to tell us about?
What? I mean, public transportation has been my life.
You've been in public transportation. One time you ran the Manchester Transit, I believe.
That's right.
Among your
Back in
many
the,
other
back
credits.
in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there we are.
And I lost my hair doing that.
So, Peter, we were talking about the fact.
We have a caller, Bob.
Oh, let's talk to our
Yeah.
caller. Hi there, caller.
We've got a caller on line one.
Happy to have you join us. You interested in rail?
Yes, I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask.
Sure.
Please do.
The first question is, the day after the election, Governor Sununu was on the exchange program on New Hampshire Public Radio, and he was asked about passenger rail. One of the things that he said was, if we put in passenger rail to Massachusetts, then all of our workers are going to get on those trains and go down to Massachusetts where they can get higher paying jobs. Of course, that seems a little iron curtain-y to me, but is this something that we need to worry about? This mass, influx.
Mass exit by rail from New Hampshire.
People leaving, the exodus of people leaving to get jobs and decimating our own workforce. The second question that I have is that a lot of what happens around these rail terminuses is that there's a lot of development, and you have people building high-end housing, and in that area where the train would come in, is one of the poorest areas in the city. So I'm worried about displacement of low-income people who are having a really hard time struggling to find a place to live. I'm afraid that there's going to be a lot of gentrification, and that's going to drive low-income people out of the area. And where are they going to go? So those are my two questions, and I'm just get off, and you can answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the call.
Those
Great
are
questions.
excellent questions.
The first question we talked about a little while ago. Yes, you are going to have people go to work in Massachusetts. You already are having people go to work in Massachusetts. And these could be people that originally worked and lived in Massachusetts and moved to New Hampshire and have grown in tenure with their jobs. Will you have new people go? Probably. But will you also attract businesses, as I said earlier, businesses, and which will increase the business profits tax, which will go to support areas like northern New Hampshire, which feels as though they're disenfranchised by not having rail? Will you have people come up here that will be attracted by companies such as Dine and Dean Kamen's facility and think tank? Yes.
All right.
Yes, and
ARM.
Exactly, and yes, but we have to look at it as a region. Will you make New Hampshire that much more marketable, i.e. the Amazon example, for businesses that say, I want to locate in New Hampshire if you have public transportation? And-
After all, we used to have a Manchester airport. Now it's called the Manchester-Boston Regional Airport.
And the second question is, yes, there will be displacement, but you can address a lot of those issues with zoning. I know they're dealing with that in Boston with all the new development, the high-end development that's going on. Marty Walsh, the mayor, is trying to balance that off with affordable housing. You can
Absolutely.
zone into new projects a certain number of units of affordable housing.
I can talk about that. I work for a company that's in the Boston construction market, which is going absolutely on fire. And I can tell you that the residential development that's going on, it certainly is. They're redeveloping a lot of underutilized space into very high-end buildings, but they are required, as you say, to either within that very building or within the neighborhood in another building, renovate another building to provide what we call workforce housing or affordable housing. And it's automatically, by putting those requirements into the building permit and the planning board process, by bringing in this development, they are bringing up the stock of workforce housing and improving it too. It's all getting redeveloped.
Yes.
I'd like to comment about the woman, her call about people going down to Massachusetts and working and draining New Hampshire. I happened to work in Boston for about a decade and a half, and I went down and I made money down there, and I brought that money back to New Hampshire. And there is a disincentive because down there you have to pay the income tax to the Commonwealth. And of course, we have high property taxes here. So there's a real disincentive to do it, and there really has to be a reason to make that attractive. And that has to be considered too, that in the United States, we try to improve ourselves. But if we improve ourselves by leaving New Hampshire to go to Boston to work, or even north, to even go down to Lowell to work, that we're bringing that money back into the state, and I don't see what the problem is to that.
And if the salary difference between Mass and New Hampshire is an issue, then is that a whole issue that needs to be addressed? If you're going to be competitive with your neighbors about attracting business, and Boston is the great economic engine. Well, you can't deny that.
Well, it's one of the
So let's be part of it, not
technology
fight
hubs
against
in
it.
the whole country, maybe the whole world.
Okay, you had asked a question earlier about, you had asked about my, what I thought about the future for rail. One of the big things that happened in the last legislative session was the creation of an organization, Businesses in Support of Rail Restoration in New Hampshire. It includes over 110 businesses, diverse businesses from Anagnos Construction, Brady Sullivan Properties, Citizens Bank, Bank of New England, restaurants, Volvo dealership in Exeter, Cocoa Early Real Estate. Here, businesses have come out and say, we want to see it happen. And the flip side,
Including our airport.
yes, and the flip side of it is, you still had our legislative leadership ignore that and say, you will not have the $4 million in federal funds to simply finish an information gathering.
Well,
And
That
that
was
was
part of their DNA.
Yeah.
That was federal money that we have paid in our taxes to the federal government
Yeah.
that was going to come back. That was not going to increase property taxes. It was not going to do any increase in our local taxes here in New Hampshire to complete the work to lay the foundation to get this off the ground.
Well, the legislature is on notice to get cracking. I mean, there's no argument. The Democrats have both the House and the Senate, and it is incumbent upon them, and Bob, you're a leader in the House, that to get cracking, because in 2 years, you're going to have to stand up and say, well, okay, what did you do and how do you answer it?
Well, one of the things I've never understood, Herb and Peter, is last time we had this offer from the federal government for a major advance in our rail project, federal funds, and they turned it down. Now I think we can change that position. Is it too late?
No, it's my understanding the money is still accessible. And if
Well,
there's,
then we got to do it.
if there's a bill to be put into the legislature, then it needs to be done. And I feel confident that this time it will pass because the whole flip of the legislature.
It's a big deal. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that because I don't want to pass on that money. I mean, why should we have that money go some other place when we have a great as need as anybody? I think
Bob, is commuter rail actually such a partisan issue that we can say with confidence that almost all of the Democrats who have been elected to the State House and to the Senate are in support of it, and almost all is it really?
Well, I don't know
like
how many
that, or is there any within the parties any disagreement?
Well,
as to the
I
efficacy
think
of
there's
it?
a huge support in the Democratic Party, and we have solid majorities in both houses. This is very exciting. That's why I'm glad you're here, Peter, and you, her. But, we still have the Sununu governorship. I mean, he didn't win by a lot, but he did win. He's going to be back. And interestingly, he was considering the ability of commuter rail to help us when we were considering the Amazon second headquarters, which, of course, we didn't really have a chance to get because, among other things, we didn't have commuter rail. And
They weren't going to do it anyway.
yeah, they weren't going to do it anyway. But I'm very excited about the potential to get this going.
And I think you have to look as a model is the Downeaster service. Downeaster is Amtrak intercity service.
Right.
Serves Woburn, Mass, Haverhill, Exeter, Dover, Durham, several stops in Maine, including Portland and ends in Brunswick.
Yeah.
It's been an economic catalyst to, Herb and I were talking earlier, to downtown Exeter, to downtown Dover. UNH is using it to...
UNH is huge.
Is to attract students and faculty
Yeah.
because of accessibility.
You're
to-
bored in Durham, you can take a train and go to Boston.
Yes, and flip side, UNH can attract students to the
Yeah.
north. And what it's also done is that it's allowed Maine to, the main tourist destinations like Old Orchard Beach, Wells, which is next to Ogunquit, Portland, to attract the international tourist market. There are thousands of
Yeah.
international tourists that fly into Boston all the time.
Yeah.
And coming from countries like China, Great Britain, continental Europe, far
They
east,
expect to get on a train.
They expect to get on a train when they get off their plane.
where the countries have spent
Yeah.
billions. In many cases, they don't even own cars, so they're looking to go to tourist destinations. New Hampshire doesn't have that. We don't have that accessibility.
I don't understand.
And we used to. We used to have the ski train that would go all the way up into the mountains and bring people up for the weekend. I mean, there was...
Hey, one came to Goffstown, New Hampshire to ski Mount Uncanunic. They called it the St. Moritz of North America.
We have had so many opportunities. In 2003, there was a study that was promoted by Mass, New Hampshire, Vermont province of Quebec to look at reestablishment of high-speed rail service from Boston to Montreal. What would that have done to Nashville, Manchester, Concord, Franklin, Lebanon, if we had that opportunity? But because of the aversion to anything rail-related, first part of the study was very positive. Second part of the study needed to be fleshed out to get more information. The DOT commissioner at the time, Carol Murray, said, "I'm not bringing requests for funds before the executive council for a project we'll never do."
Well, fortunately, she's long gone. We have more
but the attitude is still there.
Is this a vestige? New Hampshire has a long and checkered history with the railroad.
Oh, very much
for,
so.
For,
Yeah.
for a century or more, the railroads ran the state of New Hampshire. And
Well, not only New Hampshire, I mean, all
Understood,
states, all
understood, but
states.
and by the way, that was a time when the Democratic Party, before the rise of the Republicans, are we dealing with just institutional memory, aversion to railroad on the part of the Republicans? Is that what that
Have
is?
you ever
or-
been mad at somebody, and 5 years later, somebody says, "Why are you mad at Bob?" And you say, "Gee, I don't know, I can remember,
But I'm
but
still
I'm
pretty
still
mad."
mad at him."
Well, that's what that's the question I'm asking. Do you think there's any component of that? I've been trying to understand this ideological piece of this argument, and I can't. For years, I've been trying. You've heard me ask the question. I can't wrap my brain around it. It just kind
I know.
of dawned on me. Is it some vestigial
There is some
remnant?
vestige of that, but I think you have to, going back to your original comment about subsidizing transportation, it has to be understood that it becomes an investment. When you make that investment, it generates all sorts of opportunities, economic opportunities. And when you restore rail to certain stops, Nashua, Manchester, Concord, it becomes a regional attraction. It's just not to benefit those narrow towns. It to attract businesses to the region and attract riders to the region. So,
Yeah.
So is that the thing? I know that being in Manchester, we're constantly battling the legislators from the other towns that just don't want to give Manchester any money. They'll send us their problems,
I
but
tell
they
you,
won't.
one of the key opponents of rail in New Hampshire was the Speaker of the House. He did not get reelected. That's quite amazing.
Gene
But also,
Chandler-
one of the things that we need to do is to work with Mayor Craig to have the delegation from Manchester try to act as, it's like herding cats, but to act as a whole, to sit down and decide what
As
they're
they
gonna
are
do.
in Nashua.
And in
Nashua is
Portsmouth.
solid.
And Portsmouth also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we need that here so
We-
that
we-
our
I
voice,
thi-
our voice
I think we
is
can
heard.
get this. I think this is doable. We got to take our break, according to your
Yeah.
son, our
We
director.
can take a break.
We'll take a quick break.
You're taking a break.
We'll be right back.
Okay.
Hold that thought.
All right.
We'll get to it. Hello, everybody out there in our viewership in Manchester, Hooksett,
We're back.
Auburn, and we hope soon Goffstown. This is our program for the 14th of November, 1918. Snowstorm.
2018, Bob.
Man, I didn't think I was that old.
Sorry, man, didn't mean to do that right on TV.
I was thinking
but
of 1918 and Armistice Day and all that crap. Not crap.
I know
very,
we've
very
all been
serious.
thinking about that
We've
over the
been
weekend.
thinking about that. My mind's been on that. But we are talking about, we've had a really big blue wave election here in the state of New Hampshire. We have the Democrats in control of the House, may it be so, the Senate, and the Executive Council. And a lot of those Democrats are going to be anxious to move forward with something that's been talked about too long and not moved on fast enough, and that is the restoration of passenger rail service to this great city. And I think we badly need this. I hope most of our viewers agree with you. We have two fine people who are advocates for this, Herb Pence and Peter Griffin, of the president of the New Hampshire Rail Revitalization Association. And we're talking about the challenges and the problems and the opportunities that we have with this opportunity. And I got a couple of questions I'd like to throw out to both of you. Some people who oppose rail say, well, there's going to be other transportation alternatives. There's going to be pods that are going to disappear down the median, or all this sort of thing. There's going to be autonomous cars, and
Still got to fit on the highway,
yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the short answer, right? I mean, is rail in danger of becoming obsolete generally?
Can I sing the theme to the Jetsons? No, I'm just kidding. No, it's not. Actually, yes, there will always be new modes of transportation out there, but you need the balance of all the different types of transportation. We demand choice in our lives, and to say all you'll have is a bus that will be on a road or a car that will be on a road. And I'm really concerned about the demise of freight rail in New Hampshire. If you're going to ship something, will there be no freight rail left that you can only ship by truck?
Yeah, people forget that. This could really enhance our ability to bring products off the highway to our, whether it's Budweiser in Merrimack. And I remember being down there, and they said if the rail wasn't here, we wouldn't be here.
It's that's a whole other topic that we can talk about. But yeah, getting back to your point, when you have all these flying cars and these cars that you can call up on your own, there's still going to be the expense of providing the roads to support these. If you have all of the people, let's say hypothetically, that went from the small public transportation in New Hampshire to cars, we would not have enough roads. There would never be enough roads.
Right. And we don't have a lot of room to expand our roads either. And when you expand them, they just fill up with more cars. That's the self-defeating thing. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was MBTA, the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority. They operate the trains that come up as far as Lowell, right on the Nashua border, to Newburyport, not that far from the New Hampshire border, and all over. And the city of Boston would be in desperate shape without that commuter rail available. They would be the likely operator of rail to the what we call the Capital Corridor to Nashua, Manchester Airport, Manchester, and maybe Concord.
Herb, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, there is an agreement with the MBTA and Pan Am Railways, which actually owns the railroad tracks in New Hampshire, that the MBTA will be the operator.
And do they want to do this? Are they eager and able and willing to do this?
The MBTA is constrained with equipment. They have tremendous problems. Railroads, commuter rail, had been short funded for years and years and years. It is now time to pay the bill and to bring back commuter rail to a state of good repair. And you cannot have trains failing en route, on a consistent basis. You have to maintain your rolling stock. You have to maintain your employees too, so that you have the desire to provide as good a service as you can, plus the infrastructure. They can do it, but it's a long way back.
One of the things that's always shocked me is when I hear about, we do have rail service up here. I mean, we have a rail line that can be used. It used to be used mainly to carry coal to the Merrimack Station in Bow, which may be on its last legs. I mean, it's on a life support because it's been sold. It's no longer part of the Eversource, formerly Public Service. They have an obligation to operate for 18 months. It's probably now 12 months. After that, it might shut down. There may not be any more coal being delivered up there. And I understand that the maximum speed on the line from Lowell, Nashua, Manchester up to Bow is, what is it, Herb? 12 miles an hour, 10 miles?
Oh, no, probably 25 or 30 miles an hour.
Really?
Yeah. You see the trains coming through Manchester.
I mean, you don't see them coming through at that speed, but there's reasons for that. But I'm glad to hear it's not that bad. But if we're going to have passenger rail, we got to up that speed.
Well, you have highways that are in disrepair. You want speed, you repair them. It's the same thing with the tracks.
Yeah.
You have to, and under Federal Railway Administration rules, it has to be signaled. There is talk about double tracking it, which I think is, forget that.
We used to have double track running.
Yeah, but that's when you had a lot of trains. I mean, what you're running with now, you may have to put in a couple of sidings, that's it. But you have to upgrade it so that you can get the 79 miles an hour travel, which is allowed.
Which is the standard for Amtrak around the country.
Well, it's federal. It's set.
Yeah.
Getting back to the MBTA, one of the things that people have complained about, why do we want to deal with, financially, not insolvent, but stressed institution like MBTA? People forget that the MBTA got stuck with the big jig deficit.
Yeah.
So they're carrying that as well as what Herb was saying about the need for their own operation funding.
Yeah. So how much would it cost? This is what people ultimately want to know. How much it will cost and how will we pay for it to upgrade the system so that passenger rail is not only available but attractive?
That's why consultants make a lot of money. figuring out what it takes to upgrade the right-of-way, the bridges that are on the right-of-way, easing any curves. Remember, this is a basic railroad that in 1968 was hauling passengers.
Right, right.
And I think until you have more current information available, the information that's out there, and I'm not about to start quoting it, is a number of years old, and it does change. And the $4 million that was pulled out of the 10-year transportation plan would have begun to address those cost figures for the capital corridor, which would have served Nashua and Manchester and eventually Concord.
Yeah.
Herb's comments on Southern New Hampshire University is an excellent one, because would they underwrite the cost of a station if they got service from it?
And just to make sure that I think we talked about that during the break. Herb, did you make it clear that if we're going to get a rail station, a rail stop here in Manchester, it makes good sense and is a likelihood that it's going to extend a mile or two up to Southern New Hampshire University right at the Hooksett line? And you're pretty confident about that?
Have you ever said no to Paul?
Well, he owns half the buildings in Manchester.
Well, yeah, but I mean, this is something that if he puts his mind to it, that line is going to be extended, and it makes sense. As Peter said, you go over on the first train out of Boston in the morning to Durham, and the students are getting off. You know, it's morning. There's some, quote, older people that are clearly staff and instructors and professors that are also getting off. And it's something that, you know, it doesn't start the first day. You have to build anything. And
People have to be aware of it. They're going to try it.
That will build. Southern New Hampshire University is a popular university, particularly with the online classes. And to say to people in Boston, you can get on the train, you can ride all the way up, and they'll have a little bus to take you and distribute you around the campus.
One of the other things to consider, not just the commercial real estate opportunities of businesses coming to this area, but what about your ability to market your home to the Boston, to Boston? Your real estate
Oh, yeah.
listing.
Property values go up all around.
Rail
That's the
accessibility
history of when you
to
bring
Boston,
rail
yeah.
to people so they don't have to drive, their property values go right through the roof.
You're
Well,
able-
that's the woman's point, that she was talking about gentrification. But that's life. I mean, if you stand still, this is like a boat. If you stand still or you drift, you're going to sink. You've got to move forward. And when you move forward, you'll leave ripples behind you, and there is disruption.
Yeah, I think so. So what do you think, gentlemen? What do you think of the prospects are? We have a much better political environment in Concord than we've had, other than possibly in the governor's office. But he did change his position when he thought he could get the Amazon second headquarters to be considered for here. What do you think? Are we gonna get this done?
It will be a beginning. I mean, you're not going to pull everything together in 2 years, but you may pull a greater public support for it within the 2-year period.
Yeah.
I'd like to see some bills passed relating to the rail situation.
Like what?
Maybe revisit the $4 million
Yeah.
and the
Yep.
and the federal
Well, I would think
funds.
that would be number one.
Yeah.
I'm very anxious to be supportive of that.
And to continue like your programs, to educate the community and the public about the importance, and to begin to kill off some of the opposition, not physically, but with
Say neutralize
education. You neutralize it, thank you, by addressing their fears of subsidies that emphasize that everything we do today is subsidies. If you have kids, are you not subsidizing your kids until they're adults?
If you have a car, aren't you glad that we subsidize the roads?
No,
But
I think that's more direct. I mean, we pay a fuel tax, we pay tolls
Yeah, I know.
on the highways. We do subsidize those things. The airlines, I mean, that airport it has to get maintained somehow. You know, everything is subsidized. I just think To say that, a railroad has to pull its own weight from day one is just a ridiculous argument.
One of the things that someone said to me about 20-plus years ago, from both sides of the aisle, two individuals, Peter, you have to understand, New Hampshire doesn't like to invest in infrastructure, so it's going to be tough. And it has been tough. But even when 93 ran into a deficit situation and they had to find a way to come up with, I think, was it $200 million to
The
finish?
Garvey bonds.
Right.
And we finally did raise the gas tax after about 15 years with
Right,
no
and
change.
I had my state reps who, in their position papers, said, we support the widening of 93. Said, no, I don't support any new taxes, I don't support. It's like, really? It's an investment. It becomes an investment to benefit everyone in the state and the region, because we're an area that is struggling, I believe, as a region, and we're losing businesses to the southwest, to the Washington area as in Amazon. And so how do we work together as a region to make the region as more attractive?
And I
Well,
think
look
go ahead, Eric.
look at I-93. Go down 93 southbound at 5:30 at night, and all the way from the 110 Rotary, which is just across the Merrimack River, all the way into Boston. It's solid blocked cars. And the commute, when I worked in Boston, my commute was 1 hour. Now the commute is at minimum an hour and a half, and if you run into any problems, rain, snow, accident, you're looking at 2 hours or more. That is a disincentive for people, as I talked about earlier, to work in Boston and bring that Boston money back to New Hampshire and pay the property taxes.
Right. And I think there's a lot of very smart young people in the greater Boston area that might want to come here, but they don't want to drive here if they can avoid it. They want to be able to work when they're traveling. And the train permits you to do that.
And we are out of time.
How about that?
Wow.
Thank you, gentlemen. I know it was a late call to you, Peter, and to you, Herb, but thank you for coming
Really
in.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
You've
this
been
is
a
great.
great contribution. I really appreciate it, and we hope we'll make some good progress.
Well, let's hope that we have a program like this later on, 6 months, to get kind of a report from you that, how are we doing in Congress?
Yeah.
Congress
I'm
and
interested.
Congress.
I'm interested in being on it on this side. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, folks. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Progress Report, and watch out for that snowstorm. It's apparently coming. We'll be back next week.